And we'll get going. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. We have a utility adjustment petitions workshop for property owners today, and we're going to be going over some of the basic information and then jumping into what you can expect as the process unfolds. It looks like we have some new people joining us today, so if you do have any questions at any time, please go ahead and use the Q&A function to type your question, and we'll also take breaks for question time. And my name is Patricia Black. I'm one of the people who helps run the Rent Stabilization Division for the City of Mountain View, and am going to be here supporting you through the process of applying for the petition. All righty. So here's what our agenda looks like this afternoon. We're going to keep this pretty short and sweet. I'm going to jump through some of the slides that we see here at the beginning because they are gone over more extensively in already recorded workshops. Those workshops can be found on our website at mountainview.gov/RUBS. That's mountainview.gov/RUB as in boy, S. So we will go over introductions about the changes in utility billing and the regulations, and then we'll jump into the petition process. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of what the petition form looks like and the workbook, and then talk to you about what the next steps are. At the end, there will be an opportunity for questions. All righty. So we have regulation updates that occurred about a year ago on December 18th, 2023. The Rental Housing Committee adopted regulations clarifying that utilities are part of rent for fully covered units. And what does that mean? That means that under the CSFRA, which is the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act, which brings us things like rent control and eviction protections in the city of Mountain View, that law has utilities included as part of rent. It specifically states that in the law, and therefore utilities are subject to rent increase limitations. What does this mean? That means that only one rent increase can occur every 12 months. Those rent increases are subject to our yearly rent increase limitations, also known as the annual general adjustment of rent, and there can be no fluctuating rental costs within a 12-month period. That includes utilities. So if you have non-submetered, utilities that are not being billed for the actual usage by the tenant and are going through a system like RUBS or where the property owner is charging the tenants directly, that is not allowed under the CSFRA because those bills go up and down throughout the year. So to address this issue, we have adopted regulations that allow for a one-time process for property owners to incorporate utilities currently charged separately that are not submetered into a fixed total amount for the tenant's rent. So you're going to have a situation where you have your current physical space rent plus your utilities that are billed through RUBS or something similar to then equal the total rent amount. So those bills that are being billed through RUBS will go away and tenants will only have this one total that incorporates the utilities that are currently being charged separately through RUBS plus their current physical space rent. And to be able to do this, property owners must complete a petition to qualify for and apply the adjustment. So who's affected by this? All property owners of fully covered units need to complete and submit a one-time utility adjustment petition. And this allows for verification from the staff and provides an opportunity for tenants to respond to the petition. This does not apply to partially covered CSFRA units. If you have a property where you have some units that are partially covered and some units that are fully covered, you just need to apply the petition for those units that are fully covered. This also does not apply to mobile homes covered by the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance. And before I go on, I just want to take a brief break. Do we have any questions out there? If you have questions, this is a great time to ask them. If we happen to be covering the question that you are asking later on in the presentation, I will wait to answer it and then come back to it. For now, it looks like we do have a question, and I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. All righty, if you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. You mentioned about the purpose is no fluctuation of the rent amount because utility fluctuates by the usage. What if it's a fixed amount?
If it's billed through RUBS or any other way, it has to be incorporated into your total rent amount.
Right. So if it's a fixed amount, for example, if I say, okay, you share $20 every month, no change, that still need to be incorporated into the rent amount, right?
Correct. So you have to everyone has to do a petition to go through this process.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good question. And you can go ahead and lower your hand, and I'm going to mute you. If you have another question, we'll go through the same process. All righty. Okay. So what are the key points of these regulations? First of all, it clarifies what types of utilities are included in rent. This includes any utility charges paid by the tenant directly to the landlord or through a third-party billing service like RUBS. So for instance, RUBS is like Conservice. These utilities could include water, sewer, and garbage. It can also sometimes include gas and electric, although that's more rare, but some properties do have that. Utility charges that are paid directly by the tenant to the utility service provider, for example, like PG&E, or that are submetered are exempt. So what does this mean? This means that if you have submeters on your building that show exactly what that tenant usage is, and the tenant pays for their exact usage, those utilities are exempt from this utility petition adjustment process. And if you are a property owner that already includes utilities in the fixed amount of rent, that's perfect. That's exactly what you should have been doing this whole time. And you will still need to let us know what you're doing. So you can contact us and we can help you either file what we call a condensed petition or help you in some other ways to make sure that your tenants have an opportunity to respond to you saying that their rent already includes utilities. So some of the key points in the regulations are that for new tenancies starting on March 1st, RUBS is not allowed, March 1st of 2024. So all the way back starting on March 1st of 2024, for those new tenancies, RUBS is not allowed. The total rent must include utilities. The rental agreement must state that the total rent amount and specify the types of utilities and housing service fees that are included in that. And utility charges, as I mentioned before, paid directly by the tenant to the utility service provider, like PG&E, or that are submetered are exempt from this process. So again, for new tenants, the total rent must include utilities. For existing tenancies, so those tenancies that started before March 1st of 2024, RUBS can continue until a utility adjustment petition is filed with and approved by the city, and the rent adjustment notice is given to tenants and the adjustment goes into effect. Utility charges for newly rented units or vacant units may not be allocated to existing rental units through RUBS or similar systems, and utility charges paid directly by the tenant to the utility service provider are exempt. So for a limited time, utilities can continue to be charged separately from rent for existing tenants until you get approved through this process. And then tenants can file petitions with the city for downward adjustments of rent if a property owner has been in violation of the law. And there are some specific things that tenants can and cannot do right now related to utility charges. I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can go ahead and watch some previous presentations that go into more detail about that. So I see I might have one more question here before I go on. My units have separate PG&E meters, but no separate water meters. Does that mean that the rent only has to include the water? That's correct. So the rent has to include your water, sewer, and trash if those are billed separately. And then the PG&E is directly billed to tenants, and that will continue to be the case. So if it's directly billed to tenants based on their own usage, the tenant pays for that themselves. All righty. So I'm going to go into a very high level overview of the actual process, and then we'll jump into looking at some of the forms, okay? So we have an implementation plan. We are done with the first 3 phases of that implementation plan. Phase 1 was to perform research and receive input. We did that for quite a while. You'll see here through 9 months, and then we adopted regulations. Again, that finalized back in December of 2023, and then we started our actual implementation process. So we developed our plans, we tested the process, we amended regulations, and then we started actually making the forms and getting the process in place for launching the actual forms and releasing everything back in August of 2024. Starting on September 1st, we started accepting submittals. So we are now working in phases 4, 5, and 6. Phase 4 of our implementation plan is to perform outreach and education, of which you are currently involved. And then we have the time period for property owners to submit petitions to the division, and then we have to process those petitions. So you can see that this information is also available on the website for you. Property owners have to submit their petitions based on property size. If you have more than 20 units on your property, your petition is due for review by February 28th of 2025. So that's coming up in about a month and a half. For units, for properties with units between 6 and 20, those petitions are due May 31st of 2025, and then our smaller properties of 1 to 5 units are due by August 31st of 2025. So there are rolling deadlines, once again, by your property size, and you need to get your petitions in for review by those deadlines. They don't have to be served on your tenants by those deadlines, but they need to be to us by those deadlines. So which one of these is required? We have 3 different types of workbooks. You have a petition form that you provide to us, and then a workbook. And the workbook is based on what is happening on your property with utilities. So most properties will be filing what we call a standard petition workbook, Workbook A. And at least one utility is paid by the tenant directly to the landlord or through a third-party billing service like water, sewer, and trash. And PG&E, gas and electric, are sub-meter fully and or included in rent. So again, that's the bulk of our properties. Another option is Workbook B, where all utilities in some way are paid through RUBS. So in this case, at least one of these utilities, water, sewer, and trash, is paid through RUBS, and at least one of gas or electric is also paid through RUBS. So in that case, you would use this bigger, more expansive workbook. And then finally, we have one called a condensed petition workbook, and that is for properties where all utilities are sub-metered or included in rent. This is an overview of the process. So you're going to submit a petition form and workbook to the city. We will then review it for completeness and notify you if there's anything that needs to change. If it's complete, you will then serve a petition packet that we send to you on your tenants. We will then send a notice of filing to both the property owner and tenants, and then tenants have 30 days to respond to the petition. We will then review the petition after that response period, review selected calculations and tenant responses, and then we may need to request additional documentation from the property owner or from the respondee, that tenant that asked us questions, for to clarify any areas that need additional assistance. If we determine that the calculations are correct, we will send a notice of final determination to your tenants, and then you will determine if the adjustment is upward or downward and apply the adjustment accordingly. And there's a whole bunch of details about how to apply that adjustment and how it becomes part of rent, which I'm not going to go into super detail with here because no one is quite at this point yet. And we will cover it more extensively as we get further along in the process. I just don't want to bog people down with a lot of these details yet. And then what happens if no petition is submitted on time? So this is really, really important. There are significant consequences if you do not submit your petition. So keep in mind that this is basically a grace period. It's an opportunity for you, the property owner, to get in compliance with the law because you've been out of compliance with the law because your property has not included utilities as part of rent. That is technically an unlawful rent charge. This gives you an opportunity to incorporate utilities into your rent and not be dinged the unlawful rent issue, okay? So what does that mean? If you don't do this, you forego the one-time ability to add the utility adjustment amount into rent, and you can no longer separately charge for utilities. That means that the current rent amount now will automatically be assumed to include utility charges, 1. 2, utilities cannot be billed separately. And 3, tenants can also file unlawful rent petitions with the city to recover any overpayment due to RUBS charges. So if you've been charging utilities through RUBS since the beginning of the CSFRA, and your tenants have been overpaying during that time period, that means that they can recover all of that overpayment in rent after this time period, which means you could end up owing them quite a bit of money. So keep that in mind. It's a really big incentive to actually file these petitions, and you really are going to want to do so. All right, so how do we calculate these adjustments? There are forms and workbooks to help you with this that you need to and have to use. You find them at mountainview.gov/RUBS, and they are right there on the webpage themselves. And before we jump into the petition workbook and what you can expect next, I do want to see if there are any questions. Are there any questions out there right now? Okay, quiet bunch today. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share my workbook for you. So here's what the petition form looks like. Right here, you are going to need to complete this petition form. It's got a lot of information on it. It gives you pretty extensive instructions and what to do, how to prepare for your petition. You don't want to read this. It's got a lot of great information in it, and you also have information on the next steps in the process. All right, so once you get through the instructions, which is the bulk of this, you then run into a whole bunch of terms to know to help you understand the process and have key points be spelled out for you in these. And then finally, you get to the actual petition form. So this is a fillable PDF. You can type directly into it, or you can fill it out by hand, but I recommend you type into it. It makes it much easier for everybody. And you're going to go ahead and fill out your contact information if you need interpretation and translation support, if you have a representative who will be completing this on behalf of the property, they can put in their information here, and they also need to fill out another form called a representative authorization form. We then have very basic information about the property, and then there's a petition submission due dates. So this is what I was just talking about. You need to click one of these options so that we know how big your property is. Then it asks you about common area amenities. This is important because if you have these things on your property, you end up with a common area deduction of 20%. And for each one that you do not have, you get a reduction in that common area deduction. So if you don't have a pool, it goes down by 5%. So instead of a 20% reduction, it's a 15% reduction. And then you tell us what workbook is relevant to you. So this is what I was talking about earlier. There's 3 different workbooks. And then it goes over the documentation that you need. So you need to provide us with documentation to complete this petition process, and it spells out exactly what you need to provide here. And then finally, if you have any missing documentation, you need to tell us why. If you have anything else you want to let us know, you can provide some explanations here. And then at the end, you're going to go ahead and sign and date these forms. So that's the basics of the petition form. It's pretty short, pretty sweet and simple once you get through all of our introductory language and information here. And then the next thing that you'll take a look at is your actual workbook, which I'm going to show you right now. It starts out with an instruction page. Sheet 1 here is all about what the instructions are and what you need to have to complete that worksheet. The first worksheet is contact information for your tenants. The second one is specific unit information. So here you'll see that you have your unit number, the number of bedrooms. Number of bedrooms is really important, or the number of bedrooms. You're going to go ahead and pick how many you have, and then it will automatically tell us how many rooms are in the unit. So there's a specific calculation that's happening behind the scenes here that is pulling information from another worksheet that you can't even see. And it's helping us calculate the number of rooms. This is not the number of bedrooms on the property, it's the actual number of rooms in the unit. So if you have a 2-bedroom unit, it will also let you know that there is a kitchen and a living room for a total of 4 rooms. If you have a studio, it's going to say that there is a kitchen and a living room to make 2 rooms. If you have a 1-bedroom, it's going to say that there is a bedroom plus a kitchen plus a living room to have 3 rooms. The next piece of this is a calculation for the number of bedrooms for the Santa Clara County utility allowance. So basically what this process looks at is one calculation for the Mountain View calculation of utilities, and then one based on the Santa Clara utility allowance. Whichever one of those is less is what ends up being your proposed adjustment. So this piece looks at another chart. If you have a building with, and this goes by building, so where the unit is on your property, how many units are in that building. So you could have one building with 4 units and one building with 5 or 10 or 20 units, right? So you're going to let this worksheet know, and it's going to automatically pull information from another worksheet. Okay, so it's telling us that this is a studio with, and it's pulling information from a particular part of a whole other reference chart, which you see here at worksheet 2.1. We're going to then tell this worksheet that these units are occupied and or vacant. And then you're going to go ahead and put in the move-in date. This is really important. And I'm just going to put in some dummy information so that you can see how this works. Okay. And we have, actually, this is vacant, so we're going to leave this blank, excuse me. And then here we have our rent. I'm just going to put in some random numbers, the date of last rent increase. They haven't had one. So we're going to put in the move-in date because it has not been a year that these people have lived in their unit. And then for this other one, they received a rent increase on September 1st. So next we let this worksheet know how the utilities are billed. So it's a new tenant. So this new tenant has their utilities included in rent. And then this one has RUBS. Okay, so for water, and this is going to be the case for all of these. And I'm just showing you this so that you can see how the workbook works. It's going to do all of it, a whole bunch of calculations for you. You really only have to enter in some basic information here, and then we move forward from there. Okay, so we have common areas, our common area deduction. Is there a pool on the property? Yes. Is there landscaping on the property? There's specific language about what landscaping means. It's in the definitions. Yes. And is there common laundry areas? Yes. So I don't have any exemptions here. If I didn't have a laundry room, it would take that 5% off, and it's going to adjust my common area deduction. But for the sake of this, we have all of them. And then you have your bills for the property. So this is not for the unit, this is for the property. This is your total property-wide utility charges paid by tenants directly to the landlord or through a third-party billing service, right? So you're going to put in what the bills are. I'm going to say 15,000, 15,000, 12,000, and 14,000. Okay. And it's going to go ahead and I'm going to tell it the utility type. So I'm not going to fill this out all the way. I want you just to be able to see how this workbook works. You can see here, it's putting in information and pulling it into here, right? this. Okay, so you can see we have our bills here. It's calculating things. In reality, I would have described my utility charges and the period of service here, but for the sake of this, I'm going to just save us time and skip ahead. And now it's taking that information from all of the worksheets and automatically pulling it to help us make calculations, right? So it's doing all of this work. You don't have to do the math. The workbook is mathing for you. And the same thing with the per unit calculation. So now it's doing all of the math for you. It's figuring out what those per unit calculations are. And it's going to start doing the comparison that I talked about earlier for the per unit allowance. So now it's looking at the lower end of either the Santa Clara County allowance or the utility adjustment for the city calculation. And then it's picking the final amount and increasing it by inflation for a certain time period. And then the last one is your proposed amount. So here you can see that this unit is vacant, so there's nothing here. This unit, the tenant moved in and there is no RUBS being charged. Utilities are already included in rent, so there's no adjustment amount. And then here, the adjustment amount that's allowed is $179.57. So I am going to, as the property owner, propose the full amount and go from there. So that is how you fill out this workbook. It's pretty straightforward, but again, we are always here to help if you need any assistance. So I do see we have a question. Let's see. So this one has the RUBS worksheet B tab 2. How is gas charged at one of our buildings? Each unit has their own PG&E as well as a shared service bill. So you would be using, this is the standard workbook. This one does not include that option. You would be using workbook B, which is for all utilities. So it's going to look a little different and you'll have different options here, okay? And if you are doing that workbook, it will provide you with an opportunity to put in that you're going to include RUBS for that utility. Good question. And Anne, I can answer you. Let me go ahead and allow you to mute to talk. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I saw March 1st, 24. I'm a little confused with that date. So even if the tenant moving after that date, if you have separate utilities, you still need to fill out the form for this. Am I
You
correct?
should not have RUBS for anyone who has moved in after March 1st.
After March. Okay, I'm just curious.
If you have RUBS, then you have, we can talk offline. You have some very specific things that you have to do to become in compliance with the law, and you have to also pay your tenants back for any overcharges that you have because you did not include utilities in rent. So we're going to probably want to connect after.
Yeah,
the
I'm just
workshop.
curious about this because the dates, that's why I prompt the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a very specific date. That's what the regulations say. So if you have tenants that moved in after March 1st and they're being charged through RUBS, it's strictly not allowed.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
Sure. All righty. Let me see if there's any questions. Oh, so you're confused. Someone is confused about the adjustment allowed by the city versus the county. So there is a comparator here. Okay, so we have one calculation that looks at the utilities and is very specifically spelled out in the regulations how the calculation works. And that's the City of Mountain View one. And then there's a separate, there's something called the utility allowance by the, it's like a whole chart. It's put out by the county. And I'm going to show you it. It's in our it's in the workbook, so you can see it really easily. It's this worksheet over here, worksheet 2.1, the reference charts. So there's all of this math that maths and comes up with this allowance based on what gets put into these worksheets. Okay, so when that happens, there's a comparator, and we saw it over here in our per unit calculation. it's looking at the difference between the Mountain View calculation and the county calculation in that allowance worksheet. And it determines which of these is lower. And then whatever the lesser of them is what's allowed for the adjustment. So I can show you what the calculations are too, how the calculations work, but the workbook does it all for you, so you don't have to worry about it as much, because it is a little mathy. So I can show you here. Give me 1 second to pull up the screen that we need. Luckily, we figured out a way to do all of the math so that it's not super time intensive for you. So basically what happens is there's a total number of rooms in the entire property. That's what I was talking about. Each unit has specific number of rooms, right? You divide that average monthly utility charges as calculated in step 3 over here by the number of rooms to get the total monthly utility charge per room. And then calculate the allowable monthly utility charge per rental unit by determining the number of rooms in each rental unit and multiplying that by the monthly utility charge per room. And then there's the whole allowances that are allowed by the county housing authority. And then those are compared to each other, and whichever one is lesser, that's how you get your one-time utility adjustment amount. And then we also incorporated in CPI, Consumer Price Index, inflationary period adjustment. So that is there too. So all of that is taken into account in the workbook, and it just does the math for you. So it makes it a lot easier than you having to do it yourself. And let me see, I've got another question. So this is not related to what the city has been charging for water, sewer, and garbage. Would that be less than what the city charges? We don't know. It depends on how much water is being used on your property, how much sewer is being used on your property, what your bills are. So when you put in the information into the workbook, into that workbook, worksheet 5 that asks for your utilities information, it will then figure that out. So the workbook and you and your billing for your property determine that. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share with you kind of what the next steps look like after you file your petition. So what happens is you give me your petition, okay? So you're going to give me your petition form, your workbook, and the documentation as it's spelled out. That's your submittal. You have to have as much of that information as possible for me to say, yes, you submitted your petition on time, okay? So you're going to give me the form, the workbook, and the documentation. You can reach out to me at any time and I will answer and hopefully give you good information. And then we review it, okay? So you're going to give us your submission. I'm going to review it. One of my staff members is going to review it. And we're going to say, okay, this is either relatively complete, like you did a good job, we're here, or you're missing information. Most of the time at the beginning of the process, there's going to be something that's missing, whether that's like pictures of the sub-meters or your utility bills. So you're going to give me all of the information that I asked for. I'm going to review it, and I'm going to say, this looks ready to give to your tenants, or this doesn't look ready to give to your tenants. If it looks ready to give to your tenants, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we are going to give to you to make the process easier, okay? So as we've been doing this, we've been realizing that there's some things that we can just do on staff's end to make sure that you're going to have an easy time submitting this to your tenants. So you're going to have something called a proof of service form and a notice of submission. You're going to give that to your tenants with the petition form, a redacted version, because we're going to take care of making sure that you're not giving out your personal information to your tenants. We're going to also give you a workbook that is a tenant version of the workbook, and it's going to have, instead of unit numbers, unique ID numbers. So your tenants can find their information in the workbook without knowing everybody else's information. So it's one way that we're kind of making sure that things are anonymous as much as possible without you having to redact, like 400 different, if you have a property with 400 units, 400 workbooks, and only showing that one unit. So this way you have a way to just give one workbook without having all of this personal information that you have to figure out. And then you don't have to give your documentation to your tenants, but if they request it, we provide it to them and it will be redacted. So any kind of like account number or personal information will be removed from your documentation. Okay, so that's happening on staff's end. We're going to do a whole bunch of work to make it easy for you. We are also going to provide you with that proof of service form, and I'm going to show it to you so you can see what it looks like. So you're going to get this from me or my staff. And it's going to be filled out for the most part for all of your tenants. You're going to receive one of these for each of your tenants. It's going to be one big bulk file. And then what you have to do, the only thing that you're going to have to do is give me a signature. So I'm going to ask you, as we get ready to serve this, how you're going to serve this on your tenants. And you're going to tell me. You're going to say, I'm going to do it personal service, mail, or email, and I'm going to run it for you. Those boxes are going to be marked. All of this information will be filled out, except for your signature. You need to sign it, okay? You're going to let me know what date you want to serve it on and when you're going to do it. And I can go ahead and make sure that this is filled out for you as much as possible. You only need to sign the English version, but you need to provide this document in all 3 languages, okay? So you're going to get this document and it's going to have all 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Chinese, and you're going to provide it to your tenants in those languages, but you only need to sign that English version, all right? So we've taken care of the bulk of this work for you so that you don't have to fill all of these forms out individually. There's a way that we just pull information from a spreadsheet. It's called mail merge. If you don't know about it, it makes life a lot easier. And I highly recommend learning about it. And this again will be in an email to you, or you and I will talk on the phone or through Zoom or something, and you will know what's happening, but I wanted to give you an example of what this looks like. So you're going to serve this on your tenants. So it's a notice of the adjustment petition and the proof of service. You're going to give the petition form and the workbook, the specific workbook that has been PDF'd for tenants. I'm going to give this to you in an email. It's going to explain everything, okay? So that is one piece of this. Your tenants are also going to receive, once you've told me that you've served your petition on your tenants are going to receive this notice from the city, okay? And it's a notice of filing. So they're going to receive this from us. It's a whole packet, and it has information about the process for them and a response form. Your tenants have 30 days to respond to the petition once they receive this notice of filing from us, okay? So they have 30 days to respond. They get this form from us. It has specific information for them in it, and that response form that I told you about. All of this information is also available in other languages, and they can just request it if they want it. All right, so that's one thing that they receive from us. And then at the same time, you're going to get a notice of filing from our office as well. And that's going to have a workbook for you that you're going to need to fill out. And it looks like this. You are going to put the names of your tenants and their unit number, and then their utility bills. You need to gather the individual utility bills for each tenant starting July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. If your tenant moved in after July 1st of 2023, you're just going to go to whenever they moved in and put in their utility bill for that month, okay? It's going to automatically do the work for you. Again, we're trying to make this process as simple as possible so that you have the minimum amount of work to do. So you're going to go ahead and do this. It's going to figure out the average, and then it's going to do the plus 3.2%. So this is important, and we're not going to get bogged down in the details of this, but you really want to start this exercise when you receive my notice of filing. So you're going to get the notice of filing plus this spreadsheet, and you want to start filling this out, gathering this information as soon as possible, just because it's a little bit time consuming. Why does this matter? So this matters because you are going to give an adjustment of rent, right? The whole process culminates in you giving an adjustment of rent to your tenants. You have to be able to figure out if it's a downward adjustment or an upward adjustment of rent, okay? If it's a downward adjustment of rent, that means that the amount in the utility petition workbook, that proposed amount, is less than this average. If it is an upward adjustment of rent, that means that the amount in the proposed workbook is more than this average. Otherwise, this average doesn't matter. But we have to have it to be able to figure out if it's an upward adjustment or a downward adjustment. So you need to start this process sooner rather than later. You will also receive an example of what your tenants will be receiving from you for this process. So this is going to look a little different. This is an old sample, but your tenants will receive from you, but we're going to pull the information just like we did for those other forms, a form that shows this information and then whether or not it's an upward adjustment or a downward adjustment. Okay, so it's going to be a very basic form. You're going to give that to your tenants, and then you're going to also then either give them an upward adjustment or a downward adjustment when it's applicable. Those are two different time periods, and we will spell that out for everybody. So what's going to happen is you're going to start that process when I give you the notice of filing. There are then 30 days for your tenants to respond to the petition. And then my staff has time to do the actual calculations and make sure that everything looks good. And then we will send out a notice of final determination. Once we send that out, we will also send out this other form for you to notify your tenants about whether or not it's an upward or downward adjustment of rent. And then you can actually start applying the upward or downward adjustments. Again, there are different timeframes for that. I'm not going to get into it today because it starts to get more confusing. I've already bombarded you with a ton of information. So instead of that, we're going to not go into those details right now. We will cover them at a later date as we get closer to actually having petitions where upward and downward adjustments are going to occur. But I did want to mention that you're going to get this spreadsheet and you want to start filling it out sooner rather than later. Okay. Again, we've done the bulk of the work so that we've made these workbooks into a way that they do the bulk of the work, right? So that you don't have to. And it's just it makes everything so much easier and hopefully makes the process a little bit more palatable. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and pull back up my PowerPoint, and then we will go through the rest of it, and I will then answer questions. All righty, where is my PowerPoint? Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and go back through. All right, so you're going to start, you want to gather your property-wide utility bills from July 1st of 2023 through June 30th. You want to make sure you have your common area facilities documentation, your unit information, and your proof of utilities that are included in rent or submetered. You need to provide me with a new lease to show that you are including utilities in rent. You also will want to contact us at some point. You can come to our Housing Help Center. It's every single Thursday. You can come in person to our office at 298 Escuela, or you can join virtually. And you join virtually by going to mountainview.gov/housing help centers. Again, this is every Thursday. We also have office hours that are virtual every Tuesday from 10 to noon. And you can join those by going to mountainview.gov/RSP office hours. You can also just contact our division by emailing mvrent@mountainview.gov or giving us a phone call at 650-903-6136. You can go to learn more about everything that we do with our division by visiting mountainview.gov/rent stabilization. And if you need specific information about RUBS, go to mountainview.gov/RUBS. That's BS. So R is in Rhino, U is in Unicorn, B is in Boy, S is in Sam. And you can give us a call. If you do give us a call, just know that we'll call you back. You leave a message and we will call you back as soon as possible. All righty, I do have one more question here. Can we access this Zoom recording? Not only can you access this online starting Monday, but you will also just receive a link to it tomorrow. So we always send out links to the recorded workshops, and we will do that tomorrow with the PDF of the workshop too. So you'll have both things to be able to access it. And I have one more question. Anne, I'm going to allow you to talk again. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry. The process you went through, is it also same for condensed version?
It's different for condensed. So if you have a situation where you think that you are already in compliance with the law, you're going to want to contact me. And you can do that by emailing me at patricia.black@mountainview.gov.
But we still need to fill out the condensed petition.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, thank you.
And any other questions out there? It's the time to ask them if you have them. All righty. Well, we ended 10 minutes early today. And again, this is a process. And if you need help, please reach out to our office. We are here to support you in whatever way we can. And I really appreciate you taking your time out of your afternoon to join me today. So again, we have these workshops every month, and the workshops are available online through YouTube, but you can access them by going to mountainview.gov/rubs. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will be sure to talk with you soon. Have a good one.